everyone. Let's get started looking at section 2.6 part 2. So in the first part of section 2.6, we were looking at changing fractions into decimals. And now we're going to go back the other way. So we are going to change decimals into fractions. So for our warm-up, let's just take a look again. How do we change a fraction into a decimal? Well, we can divide. And since 13 is smaller than 20, we add a 0. 20 doesn't go into 1 or 3. 20 goes into 136 times. And we get a 10, and we bring that down. 20 goes into 105 times, and that is done. So 13/20 is 0.65. And again, just to kind of double check this, 13/20 is a little bit over half, right? 10/20 is half. 0.65 is a little bit over half. So we always want to have our spidey senses tingling and make sure our answer makes sense. So how do we go back the other way then? How do we go from this, the decimal, to this, the fraction? Okay, so we have 3 steps when we do that. Okay? So I like to kind of have a little process to follow. And so my first thing is to say it. Say the number. So 0.65, that's kind of like calling me Mrs. T, right? That's sort of like my nickname. It's not really what I would sign on an official document. It's not really the official way to say 0.65. Really, we say it as 65 hundredths because it is in the hundredths place value. So if we look at this number, remember the tenths is 1 place to the right of the decimal point, and the hundredths is 2. So we're going to say it, 65 hundredths. And when we say it, that allows us to write it. So what does 65 hundredths look like? It looks like 65 over 100. Okay, so we say it, 65 hundredths. We write it 65 out of 100. Or over 100, that's its equivalent fraction. And then we want to simplify it. And so 65 hundredths simplifies by dividing by 5. And remember, we did divisibility rules in Math Workshop. And so we want to divide by 5 here. And I'll give you another tip in a second. And so 65 divided by 5 is 13, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. And so the good news is we got back to our original fraction, which was 13/20 from the warm-up. The other thing is when we are doing this simplifying, because we're working with powers of 10, so the denominator that we're going to be writing is either going to be 10 or 100 or 1,000. When we're simplifying, we want to look for numbers, factors like 5 or 2 or 4 or 10, things that go into 100. So since 100 isn't divisible by 3, you're never going to simplify a decimal as a fraction by dividing by 3. So that allows us to kind of eliminate a little bit of some of the guesswork and just be a little bit more efficient. Remember, we want to work hard or work smart, not necessarily hard. So let's do 2 more. So this first one here is, how do we say it? It is 6 thousandths because we have 3 places after the decimal. And 6 is divisible by 2 and 3, but only 1,000 is only divisible by 2. And so that gives us 3/500ths. So that is our official fraction. And 600ths is a pretty small number. So if we think 3 out of 500, that's not a lot. So again, we should be thinking along those lines. The next number, if you notice, it's first of all it's -3, and then it has a decimal piece, the 48 hundredths. And so we're going to make this a mixed number. So this is going to be -3 and 48 hundredths, and 48 is actually divisible by 4. And so that's going to give us -3 and 12/25. And so 48 hundredths is a little bit under a half, and 12 25ths is a little bit under half, because 12 is half of 24. So that gives us a good, just kind of base value for, does our answer make any sense? The neat thing about doing this process here is that it allows us to take another way to write a fraction as a decimal. If the denominator is a factor of 100. So the other day, all we did was dividing. But now we can look at this and say, okay, 4/5. Well, I know that 5 times 2 is 10, and that's one of my place values. And to write an equivalent fraction, I multiply the numerator by the same value, and that gives me 8/10. And then what does 8/10 look like as a decimal? It looks like 0.8. For this one here, the next one, 19/20, we want to multiply 20 by 5 to get a 100. And so then 19 times 5, I'm going to do that over here on the side, is 95. And so this is 95 hundredths, which is 0.95. Again, 19 out of 20, that's pretty close to 1 whole. So is 0.95. And even 4/5 is, we know, over half. And so 8/10, 0.8 is over half. So again, getting our, making sure we're developing our number sets here. And the last thing this allows us to do, because what we really want to start to do is we want to start to set up different types of number, or set up to compare different types of numbers. But today, all we're going to do is determine if things are equivalent. So we don't want to know which one's bigger or which one's smaller. We just want to know if they're the same at this point. And so you can take any road that you want. You can either make them both fractions or both decimals. Sometimes it's easier to make everything a decimal, especially if you're working with a fraction that cannot be made into a multiple of 100 or 10. So our 18/25 of $1 and 78 cents equivalent amounts of money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 18/25 into a decimal. And I'm going to do that by, I'm going to do the multiplying by 4 method, because I know that 25 times 4 is 100. If you want to do the dividing method, that's absolutely okay. Go ahead and take 18 and divide it by 25. So 25 times 4 is 100, and so I need to take 18 times 4, which I'm going to do down here. And it turns out it's 72. So 18/25 is 72 hundredths, which would be 0.72. And of course, then it is not equivalent to, that's a 2. It does kind of look like an F there. It is not equivalent to 78 cents. So 18/25 of $1 is not equivalent to 78 cents. Here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to pause this video. I would like you to try the examples below, and then I would like you to come back and check your answers to these examples. All right, let's take a look at these questions here. So the first one, 0.08 is 8 hundredths. And so then 8 hundredths can be simplified to 2/25. Number 2, 2 and 35 hundredths is going to be 2 and 7/20. 35 and 100 are both, can be both divided by 5. Number 3. Now, number 3, we have a negative here. And so remember, we can put the negative out in front, or we can put the negative in the numerator. I like to kind of just put mine in the numerator. So I have negative 2 thousandths, which simplifies to negative 1/500. And then finally, number 4, 15 and 7 hundredths is just 15 and 7 hundredths, and that cannot be simplified because 7 is a prime number and does not go into 100. For the bottom 2, I have chosen the method of dividing because the fractions that I was given cannot be made into a multiple of 10, or power of 10. So for 4/11ths, I'm going to take 4 and divide by 11, And if you notice, I am going to get a repeating decimal. Remember, when we see a number in the division appear again, that's going to tell us we have something that's repeating. And because the 40 was the something that I saw in the beginning of the division, both the 3 and the 6 are going to repeat. Again, if you get a little confused about that, you can just go ahead and divide out a couple more places and make sure it works out. And so no, 45 hundredths is not equivalent to 4 elevenths, because 4 elevenths is equivalent to 0.36 repeating. For the second one, though, we actually, surprise, have another repeating decimal. Didn't plan that exactly. So 8/9 is 0.8 repeating. And so, yes, those are equivalent numbers. Again, I'm just dividing 8 by 9, and I notice that I have a repeating pattern there. So when we get back together again, we are going to practice all of these equivalencies, making decimals into fractions, making fractions into decimals, and making sure that we are comfortable going between these two forms of numbers. Great job.